Hi, my name is Jeff Price, and welcome to the class, The History of Gaming and Animation at Oklahoma Christian University. Today we're going to look at basically all of the more recent developments in game design, starting from mostly the 90s and the 2000s. So let's get started. So Tetris is a puzzle video game that was developed in 1984, and it was developed and programmed by a Russian named Alexei Pajitnov in the Soviet Union. He was working on at this computing center in Russia, and he was working for the Russian Soviet Federalist Republic. And basically, he was working and was doing some testing on a video driver and stuff like that, and he just needed something to kind of test it out. So this is actually a Russian game that is based on some blocks, and it's a very traditional Russian game with blocks, and you stack the blocks into this little in this little cube. And so he basically tried to make the same thing on the computer. So he made the pieces, and he based it after Tetris, the Greek word for four, and his favorite sport, tennis. So Tetris is kind of tennis, and this game, the Greek name for four. Sorry. Um, um, so the game is available for nearly every video game console, every operating system. You can play it on graphing calculators, even mobile phones, portable media players, PDAs, network music players. There's even an Easter egg on some non-media products like oscilloscopes and stuff like that that they use in the medical field, and as well as for engineering. Um, it's inspired Tetris serving dishes. People have played it on the side of buildings, and such. So it was hugely successful, and really it became one of the uh, sort of best-selling games of all time. So on our top 10 video games, Tetris for the PC is number 3. Part of the success of the Game Boy, it was released in 1989 by Nintendo, and it was a very simple game. Other games had a lot of other fancy devices and screen. This one basically had a very monochrome screen and a tiny speaker. But what it did have is Tetris, and people really love playing Tetris, so you could play it on the Game Boy. Once again, it was released in 1989, and it was developed by Gunpei Yokoi of Nintendo Research and Development. And basically, the things that other games such as the Atari Lynx and Sega Game Gear were much more expensive, and they had a lot of color graphics. But he wanted something that would not have so much high techness, but really have a longer playing time. It had a 10-hour battery life and a lower retail price, so that really what made it more successful. Plus, shipping with Tetris, or the ability to play Tetris, the bundle with it. So 1984's Tetris is a puzzle video game originally designed and programmed by Alexei Pajitnov in the Soviet Union, and it ensured the success of the Nintendo Game Boy. While Nintendo's competitors focused on engineering flashy handheld consoles with color graphics and impressive sound capabilities, Nintendo's more successful Game Boy opted for a monochrome screen, tiny speakers, and a low cost. The Sega Game Gear was Sega's first handheld game console. It was a third commercially available color handheld console after the Atari Lynx and the Turbo Express. The Neo Geo is a cartridge-based arcade and home video game system released in 1991 by the Japanese company SNK. And, the MVS, or the multi-video system, is what that was known sort of in the coin-op industry. It basically offered arcade operators the ability to put up 6 different arcade titles on a single cabinet. And this was really useful for arcade guys that ran arcades, because then they could swap games out. People could play multiple games, and you're not, when a game kind of went out of style, it wouldn't just be one game. So you can see up here on the cabinet in the arcade, you could choose one of 4 games. So that was really kind of cool. Um, several games like Fatal Fury, The King Fighters, Metal Slug, and Samurai Showdown were released. The Neo Geo system was also marketed as a very low-cost home console, referred to the AES, Advanced Entertainment System. It was marketed as a 24-bit, although it was technically parallel processing 16-bit system with 8-bit coprocessor, and but this was a pretty popular game console, but never really rivaled the Nintendo games or game systems. The TurboGrafx 16 was in Japan, and it basically was released in '87 as the TurboGrafx 16 Entertainment Super System, and it was about once again it did all right. It was ranked 13th greatest video game console by IGN, but lacked third-party support, and it didn't have a second controller port, and it was also kind of just sort of really underpowered. The Super Nintendo Entertainment System, many of you guys have probably played this, is a 16-bit video game system that was released by Nintendo in 1990. Nintendo's strong selling point, however, was the game came packed with the Super NES console Super Mario World, and you can kind of see on the screen. And it was their second home console following the NES, and it had advanced graphics, sound capabilities, and with other consoles that were compared at the time. And it had a variety of enhancement chips, and which really helped it become competitive. So the Super NES was a global success, becoming the best-selling console of the 16-bit era, despite its relatively late start and the fierce competition it faced in North America and Europe from Sega Genesis. It remained popular well into the 32-bit era, although they quit making it, and a lot of people it continues to be popular among fans and collectors, retro gamers, enthusiasts, and all that. So on our top 10 video game consoles, number 4 is a Super NES. The Legend of Zelda 1991, Link to the Past, is an action-adventure game developed and published by Nintendo for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, and it's the third installment of the Legend of Zelda series. It was first released in 1991, and then later in North America and Europe in 1992. Shigeru Miyamoto and his teams were solely responsible for the game's development. A Link to the Past plot focuses on Link as he travels on a journey to save Hyrule, defeat Ganon, and rescue the 7 descendants of the sages. A Link to the Past is the first appearance of what would subsequently become a major Zelda trademark, which is the existence of 2 parallel worlds between which the player travels. The first, called the Light World, is the ordinary Hyrule where Link grew up with his uncle. The second is what's once the Sacred Realm, but became the Dark World when Ganon acquired the Triforce. A Link to the Past uses a top-down perspective similar to that of the original Legend of Zelda. It added mechanics and concepts to the series that have become commonplace, including multi-level dungeons, new equipment such as the hook shot and the Pegasus boots, as well as establishing the concept of an alternative, parallel, and sometimes even more dangerous world. It has been very well received since its release and viewed as one of the greatest video games of all time. The Dark World is a corrupt version of Hyrule. The water is dark, unpleasant green color. The grass is dead. Skulls replace rocks and pots, and trees have faces. People change forms in the Dark World based on their nature without an item to prevent it. In this case, the Moon Pearl. Link turns into a pink rabbit. Each location in the Light World corresponds to a similar location in the Dark World, usually with a similar physical structure but the opposite nature. So, basically, I'll play a little bit of the game here. can't show too much because of copyright issues on YouTube, but I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of the gameplay if you haven't played it. Most of you guys probably have already played this. So the top 10 video games, number 10, Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past for the SNES. Super Metroid is also known as Metroid 3. It's an action-adventure game and the third game in the Metroid series that we studied earlier. It was published by Nintendo for the SNES system in 1994. The game's story follows Samus Aran as she attempts to retrieve the stolen Metroid from the space pirates. Super Metroid is an action platform game which primarily takes place on the fictional planet Zebes, which is large, open-ended world with areas connected by doors and elevators. The player controls Samus as she searches the planet for Metroid that was stolen by Ridley, the leader of the space pirates. Along the way, the player jumps and collects power-ups to enhance her armor and weaponry, as well as grant her special abilities such as a space jump, which allows her to jump infinite times to cover great distances. These abilities allow her to access areas which were previously inaccessible. This particular one introduces a lot of new concepts to the series. Among them are the ability to enable and disable weapons, and the abilities in the inventory screen, and the moonwalk ability, which was kind of named after the dance move from Michael Jackson, which allows Samus to walk backwards while firing her weapon. The game also features the ability to combine her weapon beams. In addition, the save system for Metroid 2 returns in Super Metroid, which allows the player to save and restart games at any of the save points scattered around the planet. The player also can save the game at the gunship, which fully recharges her health and ammunition as well. And it received a lot of critical acclaim, Super Metroid, and we'll take a look at that. Once again, I'm just going to kind of jump through it just for just to kind of show you a little bit of it. So top 10 video games, Super Metroid is number 9. The next is a game called Star Fox, and it was published by Nintendo. The original game was a forward-scrolling 3D sci-fi rail shooter. Later sequels are added to more directional freedom as the series progressed. The game was designed by Shigeru Miyamoto. So I had forgotten actually a little video, so I downloaded that really quickly. But the original game was a forward-scrolling 3D sci-fi rail shooter, and later sequels added more directional freedom as the series progressed. And the game was designed by Shigeru Miyamoto. The game follows an independent mercenary unit called Star Fox, which is made up of these sort of anthropomorphic animals, and you can kind of see a little picture of one of them on the screen. And their adventures around the fictional Lylat system. So here's a little bit of the video. I'll fast forward a little bit. So, Star Fox had a lot of series. In '93, there's Star Fox, and '95, Star Fox 2, which was later canceled. '97, Star Fox 64. 2002, Star Fox Adventures. 2005, Star Fox Assault. 2006, Star Fox Command. And 2011, Star Fox 64 3D. So, let's see. Super Mario Kart is a go-kart racing video game developed by Nintendo for Super Nintendo Entertainment Systems. It's the first game of the Mario Kart series, and it was released in America in 1992. It's often credited with creating the kart racing subgenre of video games, leading other developers to try to duplicate its success. The game is also seen as having been the key to expanding the Mario series into non-platforming games, where the main goal is platform games is where the hero has to rescue the damsel in distress. This diversity has led to become the best-selling game franchise of all time. Several sequels have been released, and for consoles, handhelds, arcades, all of them have a lot of success. In Super Mario Kart, the player takes control of one of 8 Mario series characters, each with differing capabilities. In single-player mode, players can race against the computer-controlled characters in multi-race cups over 3 difficulty levels. During the races, offensive and speed-boosting power-ups can be used and gain advantages. Alternatively, players can race against the clock in a time trial mode. In multiplayer mode, 2 players can simultaneously take part in the cups or can race against each other on 1-to-1 in match race mode. In a third multiplayer mode, battle mode, the aim is to defeat the other players by attacking them with power-ups, destroying balloons which surround each cart. It's got a lot of critical praise, and you can kind of see this is sort of the look of how it looks. The Sega Genesis is a 4th generation video game console developed and produced by Sega. It was originally released in North America in '89. The controversy over games like Mortal Kombat in the United States forced Sega to create the first content rating system for video games, the Video Game Rating Council, rather than have the games heavily censored. The rating system allowed Sega to ship games with little or no censorship, and it gave it a competitive edge when the system game was released by Nintendo. The success of those games eventually forced Nintendo to join its rating system. And so the Sega Genesis is on our top 10 video game consoles. Mortal Kombat, commonly abbreviated as MK, is a science fantasy series of fighting games created by Ed Boon and John Tobias. The first 4 renditions and their updates were developed by Midway Games and initially released on arcade machines. Their arcade titles were later picked up by Acclaim Entertainment for the home console versions. So beginning with Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, Midway Games exclusively created home versions of Mortal Kombat up until Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe. Following Midway's bankruptcy, the franchise was picked up by Warner Brothers, and in 2009 it became part of Warner Brothers Interactive Entertainment branch. In the Mortal Kombat series of fighting games, the fatality is a finishing move that can be used against one's defeated opponent at the end of a final match after the boss character says, "Finish him" or "Finish her." The fatalities are usually lethal, featuring a brutal and morbid execution of the defenseless enemy character, such as like ripping maybe the spine out of your defeated opponent. However, some of them are actually non-violent and humorous, and some even result in a suicidal death of the losing character. The series began originally as a game based on a popular actor martial artist Jean-Claude Van Damme. The idea fell through and Mortal Kombat was born instead. So, as a result of the success, Mortal Kombat has spawned many sequels and spun into many adventure games, films, animated and live action with its own sequel, and a television series, animated and live action. Other spin-offs include various comic book series, a card game, and a live action tour. So, the original 3 games and their updates, Mortal Kombat, Mortal Kombat 2, and Mortal Kombat 3, Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, and Mortal Kombat Trilogy were styled in the 2D fighting fashion with gameplay consisting of 5 buttons that were high punch, low punch, high kick, low kick, and block. Um, and let's see here. Let's play a little bit. And I'll see if I can get to a fatality. So that kind of gives you an idea of the finishing moves or the fatalities. So, in our study guide, the Super Nintendo's strongest selling point was a game that came packed with the Super Mario World. 1992 Super Mario Kart created the kart racing subgenre of video games and expanded the Mario series to non-platforming games. And Midway's 1992 Mortal Kombat fatalities or finishing moves led to the creation of the first video game rating system, or ESRB. Madden is one of the very first football games. Obviously, there was Football Manager before and some other soccer type games and things like that, but this was developed was first of the Madden football games and released by Electronic Arts in 1988. One of the problems that initially came out was that that it couldn't handle the amount of graphics, so they only, instead of having the right number of people on the side of the team, they only had like 8 on each team, which John Madden would not sign off until they fixed that problem. So there was a little bit of a delay in the release. It features John Madden on the cover, which is he was a popular sports figure, coach, and commentator on TV. It featured customizable aspects such as weather conditions, hot, rain, snow, cold or windy, time of quarters, player fatigue and injuries, and penalties. Unlike future games, this first version did not have season play, only single games. And no actual NFL teams were included because they had not licensed it with the NFL at that point. So basically, the guy that started EA, which is Trip Hawkins, he created a clone of the Stratomatic paper and dice-based football simulation game when he was a teenager. The game was unsuccessful due to its complexity, and Hawkins always hoped that one day he'd put this onto the computer. He wrote a football simulation for the PDP-11. Do you remember the computers, the large-scale computers at the colleges at Harvard? And he found Electronic Arts in '82, and he began designing and developed this game. He first approached a very famous quarterback, Joe Montana, to endorse the game, but he already had an endorsement deal with Atari, so he couldn't do it. And then he also looked at California University's coach, Joe Kapp, but he wanted too many royalties, so that's why they decided to go with Madden. So here is a little bit of from the first game to now. So this is the first one. So I wanted to show you a little bit of some of the new Madden stuff, and actually this says 2011, but this is the brand new one, 2013 version. I just put it in here. I'm gonna fast forward through this a little bit.
Just trust what you see. For me, I visualize all the time. So when I see it, I trust it.
From the field surface where we render almost every blade of grass, you zoom in and see details that you never saw before in Gen 3.
Because of the new fidelity, we're able to zoom out the camera more, but we're also able to zoom the camera in even more than we had before.
You don't have to compress the animation as much, so the animation fidelity is stronger across the board. Everything you see, there's more detail in every frame.
We're really able to push like the limits of how we do lighting on our players and how the helmets look now, and the jerseys are so much better fidelity in every shot. You're just like, wow, this game looks amazing.
And it's not just about the detail, the way materials react. So for example, skin has subsurface light going through the skin that happens to us, and now it happens in the game.
The way that their skin deforms when they smile or scream.
We render thousands of characters in 3D. When you look at how beautiful the stadiums, the lighting looks.
CenturyLink, there's nothing like it. It's one of a kind. The atmosphere is just so alive.
I think these things are really obvious right away, and these are things that we just couldn't do in the past.
And here is another version.
EA Sports. Nothing rivals the pageant of the fall, the traditions, sights, and sounds.
This is college football.
College football apart from every other sport. From the locker room to the mascots leading you onto the field, or even Chief Osceola planting his spear. School-specific traditions get you fired up for kickoff. And speaking of fired up, just listen to this crowd.
So this is a little bit older version.
The game is the addition of HDR lighting. Watch how the exposure changes as the camera rotates around the player. The cameras in NCAA Football 12 work just like camera lenses do in real life. Put it all together, and without a doubt, this is the best looking version of NCAA football today.
Okay, Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic the Hedgehog is a 1991 16-bit platform video game developed by Sega and published for the Sega Genesis. It's the first installment in Sega's flagship Sonic the Hedgehog video game series and the first title developed by the Sonic team. In the game, Sonic must prevent the evil scientist Dr. Robotnik, named Dr. Eggman in the Japanese version, from collecting the 6 Chaos Emeralds in an attempt to rule South Island. By instead collecting them himself, the player controls Sonic as he traverses 6 zones, each of which is split into 3 acts. So, in the gameplay is kind of a 2D side-scrolling platformer game, and it centers around the Sonic's ability to run at high speeds with levels that include springs, slopes, high falls, and loop-de-loops. The levels are populated with hazards in the form of animals Dr. Robotnik has trapped inside mechanical bodies named Badniks in the game, and the player must avoid rows of sharp spikes, bottomless pits, and other obstacles. So Sonic's main means of attack is a spin attack, where Sonic curls into a ball, and which can be performed by jumping in the air or by pressing down the D pad while moving on the ground, and the move is used to destroy enemies and other obstacles in the way. So around each map are gold rings, which are signature to the Sonic series. So collecting 100 rings rewards a player with an extra life. And we'll watch a little bit of Sonic here. Okay, in 1993, we have Star Wars X-Wing, and it's a series of space combat simulation video games set in the Star Wars universe. And it basically attempts to simulate the fictional experience of a starfighter combat while remaining faithful to the movies. The player took the role of a pilot in the Rebel Alliance, and in later games, you could actually play as the Galactic Empire in a TIE fighter and stuff like that. As you can see, X-Wing TIE fighter, then X-Wing versus TIE fighter, and X-Wing Alliance. So to complete the games, players must complete missions such as simple dogfights with opposition starfighters, reconnaissance and inspection tasks, escort duties for freighters or capital ships, or attacks on larger opposition ships. In addition to dogfighting, it's kind of meant to resemble World War II duels in the air, and so basically, you could have a lot of different different types of fights. So you got some instructions, and then I'm going to get on to the fighting. So now this is TIE Fighter. I mean, X-Wing Fighter, so you're fighting the TIE Fighters. So on our top 10 video games, Star Wars TIE Fighter Collector CD-ROM for the PC is number 8. Duke Nukem is a platform game developed and published by Apogee Software, now 3D Realms, and it features the adventures of the fictional character Duke Nukem. It was released on 1991. The game is set in the near 1997, which is the near future when the game was released in 91. And you play this character named Duke Nukem, and Dr. Proton is a madman determined to take over the world with his army of tech bots, and you have to take on the task of stopping him. The first episode takes place on the devastated city of Los Angeles. In the second episode, Duke follows Dr. Proton to a secret moon base, and in the third, Dr. Proton escapes into the future, and Duke pursues him through time and to put a permanent end to his mad schemes. So from this one game, and unfortunately I don't have any gameplay, so this is sort of what it looked like. You had Duke Nukem, Duke Nukem 2, Duke Nukem Plutonium, Duke Nukem 3D, which we're going to see in a little bit, Duke Nukem Forever, and Duke Nukem Mobile. You can actually download this version on your phone for free. Actually, it may not be for free, but you can download it and play it. It's like $1 maybe. Duke Nukem 3D, and it's a first-person shooter computer game developed by 3D Realms and published by GT Interactive Software. The full version was released for the PC, and a shareware was also released in '96. It is a sequel to the platform game Duke Nukem that we just saw, and it also had a Plutonium expansion pack. Duke Nukem 3D features the adventures of the macho Duke Nukem, who fights an alien invasion on Earth. Reception of Duke Nukem 3D was very positive, and they praised him interacting in the environment. But it was very controversial because it had very erotic elements, and it portrayed women, very poorly. And one of the it started to become part of the way in which most 3D players 3D things would work. Now, I put a warning up there for adult content, so there might be some language or girls dancing in bikinis. So if you have kids or whatever, this might not be the best one to watch. But sort of this, you can even see even in the load game, you could check which one that you want to do, easy, less rock. So this sort of direct, almost non-standard way of saying starting game, easy, hard, they did it sort of this way, made it kind of more interesting for people and a little different. So you start on this roof, and you really don't know how to get out, but finally, if you shoot some of these propane tanks, you can get down to a level, and you have health down here and all the ammo information, and you can collect health around the areas. So there's a variety of weapons and different areas where you go and take on these mutant aliens in Los Angeles. A movie theater, and I'm going to kind of fast forward through some of these, a bar, and there's a bathroom and a movie projector and stuff like that. So, like I said, there's some adult content there, and you know, it's definitely not for kids. You know, the Duke Nukem Forever, unfortunately, it was a sequel, but they kept promising that they would release it. Remember, this was made in 1996, so everybody kept hearing that they were going to keep releasing, and eventually, you know, went through a variety of game companies, and you know, it was almost sort of a joke about if it would ever be released. You know, and it's the first kind of, not first, but a notable example of what they call vaporware. Because it took so long to develop, people kept saying it's going to be released next year, and you know, they'd get more funding and it wouldn't get released. So it finally got released in 2011, and by that time, games had developed into a lot different stuff. So the gameplay was very similar to the original, but just with better graphics, and so people weren't really. I guess it didn't go over very well, just because, you know, this sort of style of game was not. It had been done so much better by other games, like Halo and other things. So anyway, that's Duke Nukem Forever. So, in 1981, Castle Wolfenstein was an early stealth-based action-adventure shooter computer game developed by Muse Software for the Apple II. It was a stealth-based action-adventure shooter game set in World War II, and the game's main objective was to traverse the levels of the castle and find the secret war plans and escape alive. Progressively higher military ranks are earned upon successful escape with the war plan. The game becomes correspondingly more difficult as higher rank is achieved. There are 8 ranks, beginning with private, culminating into the rank of field marshal. It combines adventure elements of computer games with real-time action elements of arcade games, and it was played from a top-down perspective, though the characters are seen upright like in a side-scroller. The player traverses the level, sneaking past guards, impersonating Nazi soldiers, and sometimes even killing opponents. It was controlled with basically their joystick, paddles, or a keyboard. And this is sort of what it looked like. And once again, this is a time period, you know, we're going back to 1981, even kind of earlier than some of these games that we saw just a second ago. And so, you know, this is basically how they would release it, you know, with just a simple printed piece of paper in a, like in a baggie or something like that. And that's, you know, this was, you know, once again, the start of sort of this style. And we're going to see in the next one the similar style to what we just saw with Duke Nukem, or some of these other games like Doom and things like that. And this is the next one, which is what I'm talking about. And this came out in 1992, Wolfenstein 3D, by id in Dallas and Apogee Software. Once again, it still has that sort of, you know, straight up front, you know, kind of conversational menus and things like that. And it's regarded by the critics as having both popularized the first-person shooter genre on the PC and creating the basic archetype upon subsequent games, which could be built at that time. It was in Wolfenstein 3D, the player assumes the role of an American soldier of Polish descent named William B.J. Blazkowicz, and you attempt to escape from the Nazi stronghold of Castle Wolfenstein. After the initial escape episode, the player carries out about 5 other episodes organized against Nazi operations. Throughout the game, numerous armed guards, attack dogs, and mutant soldiers oppose the player, and the building traverse contained health supplies, foods, and medical kit, just like we've seen in some of these other games. There are 4 weapons, a knife, and 3 guns, and basically you can find them and use them. The interesting thing about Wolfenstein 3D it was initially released as shareware, and a lot of people would copy this, and the shareware release contained 1 episode containing about 10 missions or levels. The commercial release consisted of 3 episodes, which includes the shareware episode and 2 more episodes. Later releases included 3 episodes mission pack called the Nocturnal Missions, and basically this idea of having shareware really made this game popular. And here is the game. Very simple graphics. Once again, shooting Nazis. I'm gonna fast forward a little bit. So, German Shepherd dogs. I think he gets a machine gun here in a second. Yeah, a little machine gun. Okay. So in our study guide, due to man's insistence that the game be as realistic as possible and have the right number of players, the first version of John Madden Football was not released until 1980 due to technical limitations. 3D Realms' 1996 Duke Nukem's erotic elements and portrayal of women incited controversy, and ID's 1992 Wolfenstein 3D popularized the first-person shooter genre on the PC and created the basic archetype for all first-person shooter games. So Doom is a landmark 1993 first-person shooter video game by id Software, and it is widely recognized for having popularized the first-person shooter genre, pioneering immersive 3D graphics, networked multiplayer gaming, and support for customized additions and modifications via package file in a data archive known as a WADS, W-A-D-S. Its graphic and interactive violence, as well as its kind of satanic imagery, also made it the subject of a lot of controversy. In Doom, players assume the role of a space marine who must fight his way through a military base on Mars' moon Phobos, and he must kill the demons from hell. The ability for others to create custom levels and otherwise modify the game in the form of custom WAD files, in that sense for where is all the data, turned out to be a particularly popular aspect of Doom. Gaining the first large mod-making community, Doom affected the culture surrounding first-person shooters and also the industry. Several to-be professional game designers started their careers making Doom levels as hobbies. One of them, Tim Willits, who later became the lead designer of id. With a third of the game, or basically 9 levels, distributed as shareware, Doom was playable by an estimated 10 million people within 2 years of its release, popularizing the mode of gameplay and spawning a gaming subculture. As a sign of its effect on the industry, games from the mid-90s boom of first-person shooters often were known as Doom clones. And, people would say Doom Killer, or, if it was supposed to be better than Doom. So here is a video of Doom. The 3DO Interactive Multiplayer, simply just referred to as a 3DO, is a game console originally produced by Panasonic in 1993. The system was conceived by entrepreneur and Electronic Arts founder Trip Hawkins. Despite a highly promoted launch and even being named as Time Magazine's 1994 Product of the Year and a host of other cutting-edge technologies, the 3DO's high price, which was about $699.95 back in 1993, which today that might be roughly it could be like $1,000 or $900. Was limited. It had limited third-party developer support, and an oversaturated console market prevented the system from achieving any kind of success comparable to Sega and Nintendo. Basically, they wanted to create a next-generation CD-based video game entertainment standard, which would be manufactured by various partners and licensees. And basically, 3DO would then collect a royalty on each console sold and each game manufactured. To game publishers, the low $3 royalty rate per game was a better deal than the higher royalties paid to Nintendo and Sega when making games for their consoles. However, the game system itself was very expensive, and the manufacturers had to make a profit on the hardware, whereas most major game console manufacturers such as Nintendo and Sony sold their systems almost as a freebie in hope of making up the loss with the software sales. The Atari Jaguar is a video game console that was released by Atari in 1993. It was the last to be marketed under the Atari brand and until the release of the Atari Flashback in 2004. It was designed really to basically surpass the Mega Drive or Genesis, the SNES, and then the Panasonic 3DO in processing power. Although launched 1 year earlier, it was eventually in competition with the Sega Saturn, the Sony PlayStation, and other consoles that made up the 5th generation of video game consoles, and really couldn't compete with all those. The PlayStation is a 32-bit 5th generation video game console, first released by Sony in Japan around 1994. It was the first of the PlayStation series of consoles, and later the PlayStation 2 came around in 2000, and it was the first computer entertainment platform to ship 100 million units. And then in 2000, a redesigned slim version was released called the PS1, and that sort of ended the original gray console. The last game was FIFA Football 2005, and that's the PlayStation. So on our top 10 video game consoles, the PlayStation is number 7. Quake is a first-person shooter game that was released by id, who had also done Doom, in 1996. It was the first game of the popular Quake series of games. In single player, the players explore and navigate to the exit of each level, facing many challenging monsters, a few secret areas. Usually there are buttons or press the keys in order to collect to open doors before the exit can be reached. Once reaching the exit, the game takes the player to the next level. Before the start of the next level, there's a series of 3 pathways with easy, medium, and hard skill levels. In order to reach a nightmare skill level, described in the game manual as so bad it was hidden, so people don't wander into it by accident, the player must drop through the water before the episode 4 entrance and jump into a secret passage. In multiplayer mode, which was more popular, players on several computers connected to a server, which could be a dedicated machine or one of the player's computers, where they can either play a single-player campaign together in co-op mode or against each other in multiplayer. When the players died in multiplayer mode, they can immediately respawn but lose any items that were collected. Similarly, items have been picked up previously respawn after some time and may be picked up again. The most popular multiplayer modes are in the form of a deathmatch. And deathmatch modes typically consisted of either a free-for-all, one-on-one duels, or organized team play with 2 or more players per team playing. Team play is also frequently played with one another, with another mod that somebody had made, and typically monsters weren't present, and they would serve no purpose other than just to get in the way. basically the gameplay in Quake was considered unique for its time because of the different ways the player can maneuver through the game. For example, bunny hopping or strafe jumping can be used to move faster than normal, while rocket jumping enables the player to reach otherwise inaccessible areas and cause some self-damage. So here is the single player view. And here is the deathmatch multiplayer mode. So there was Quake in 96, Mission Pack 1 in 97, Mission Pack 2, Quake 2 in 97, more Mission Packs, Reckoning Ground Zero in 98, Quake 3 Arena in 1999, Team Arena in 2000, Quake 4 in 2005. There's also some spin-offs like Quake Mobile in 2005, Enemy Territory, Quake Wars 2007, Quake Arena Arcade in 2010, Quake Live in 2010, and so there's several games that came out from this one franchise. The Resident Evil games were developed in 1996, and they're what's called a survival horror game by Capcom. And basically, this was the very first installment of a big series, and it was originally released for the PlayStation, and then later ported to the Sega Saturn and the PC. The player's character is a member of a special law enforcement task force who is trapped in a mansion populated by dangerous mutant creatures. The objective of the game is to uncover the mystery of the mansion and ultimately escape alive. The game's graphics consisted of 3D polygonal characters and objects superimposed over pre-rendered backdrops with predetermined camera angles. The camera controls the character by pushing the D-pad or analog stick right or left and moving it forward, backwards, or whatever. In 2002, a remake of the game was released for Nintendo GameCube, featuring new graphics, voice acting, and many gameplay changes. It was one of the first games to be dubbed the survival horror, and it was, kind of, once again, something that people would refer to in that genre. It was initially, the inspiration behind it was an earlier game called, Sweet Home, and so that might be something to look into. So there's Resident Evil in 96, 97, the director's cut, Resident Evil 2 in 98, Resident Evil 3 in 99, in 2000, Resident Evil Survival, Veronica, Resident Evil Gaiden, 2001, 2002's Resident Evil GameCube remake, Dino Stalker, and Resident Evil 0. In 2003, there was Resident Evil Dead Aim and Outbreak. In 2004, Outbreak File Number 2. 2005, Resident Evil 4. 2006, Resident Evil Deadly Science. 2007, The Umbrella Chronicles. 2009, The Dark Side Chronicles. 2010, 2011, The Mercenaries 3D. 2012, Revelations, and Operation Raccoon City. Here is a little bit of the gameplay from the very first one in 96. There was a couple of movies that came out based on the games. Resident Evil in 2002, Apocalypse in 2004, the movie Resident Evil Extension in 2007, Resident Evil Afterlife 2010, and then Retribution 2012. So this is the first one.
Security has been breached. A deadly virus capable of contaminating the entire world has been released by Umbrella Corporation.
Oh my god.
We have to get out of this building. What was that? It's the bridge!
It's okay, we're here to help. Now, an elite team has been sent in to stop it.
5 hours ago, Red Queen went homicide.
Who's the Red Queen?
State-of-the-art artificial intelligence.
The corporation's keeping a few secrets down here. Something you're not supposed to see.
But they have only 3 hours left before it begins infecting and mutating the whole human race.
Everyone stay calm.
What's that?
Hit me, man! She took a chunk clean right out of me.
You have to get out.
Don't listen to anything she says. She's a holographic representation of the Red Queen.
She may be our only way out of here.
Oh, God. She's still standing.
She isn't standing now.
And here's another one of the movies.
Avenger who's hunting down the Umbrella Corporation, looking for Matt, who's been taken off mutating, and
Started spinning him. I hope so.
the idea was we'd have this rocket shoot a camera and then kind of freeze.
And here's Resident Evil 6 in 2002. I'm sorry, 2012.
Biokinetic weapons are a global threat. Start working with the rest of the world on the Raccoon City incident. Soon my desire to reveal. I'm going to tell them everything. I've always valued your friendship, Leon.
Stay wherever you are. Mr. President!
It's not my fault. I did this.
What are you talking about?
90% of the population in Tall Oaks has been infected with the virus. That rounds out to about 70,000 hostiles.
This is Raccoon City all over again. You want to tell me what's in there?
It's better if I show you.
I can't keep running over. Generating. All right. Another 200 when this is over. All the BOWs, those are extra. Much better off as a mercenary.
Not gonna let anything happen to you. The world needs you.
No, not me. Just my blood. Oh, the world can have it. If someone ponies up the dough.
After what she's done to us, how many of our men are dead because of that bitch? I'm right there with you, Captain.
Okay, the Elder Scrolls in 1994. The Elder Scrolls Arena is first game in the Elder Scrolls series. It's a first-person computer role-playing game for MS-DOS, and it was created by Bethesda Softworks. It was intended for players to assume the role of an arena combatant, but development shifted the game into a role-playing game, RPG. This game began in the tradition based on the principle of being who you want and doing what you want, and that persisted throughout the series' history. Like its sequels, Arena takes place in the continent of Tamriel, complete with wilderness, dungeons, and a spell creation system that allows players to mix various spell effects into new spells as long as they have the money to pay for it. The game is played from the first-person perspective. Melee combat is performed by using the mouse and dragging the cursor across the screen for attack. Magic is used by cycling through the menu found by clicking the appropriate button on the main game screen and then clicking the spell to be used and its target. This makes playing as the mainly magic-using character quite difficult. The game world is very large. Players may explore outside cities into the wild, where they may find inns, farms, small towns, dungeons, and other places of interest. As the terrain was randomly generated, it may be repetitive to some, and basically you couldn't reach other cities without using the fast travel feature. And here is an example of so you can kind of see, once again, same similar graphics to, say, Doom or Castle Wolfenstein, but in this sort of medieval look. So all these basically almost have the same sort of engine and style about them. So you can kind of see the graphics are better in this second version. Okay, that's going to lead us to the Elder Scrolls V, which is Skyrim, and it's a role-playing video game developed by Bethesda and published by Bethesda Softworks. It's the fifth installment, obviously, number 5. And it was released in 2011, and it revolves around the player's character efforts to defeat Alduin, the first of the Tamriel primary deity, Akatosh, and basically he's prophesied to destroy the world. So set 200 years after Oblivion, which was Elder Scrolls IV, the game takes place in the land of Skyrim, which is in the midst of civil war after the assassination of the High King. The open world gameplay of the Elder Scrolls series returns in Skyrim, and the player can explore the land at will and ignore or postpone the main conquest indefinitely.
Should have acted. They're already here. The Elder Scrolls told them the return. The defeat was merely a delay. Till the time after Oblivion opened. When the sons of Skyrim would spill their own blood. No one wanted to believe they even existed. And when the truth finally dawned, it dawned in fire. But there's one they fear. In their tongue, he is Dovahkiin, Dragonborn.
Okay. So Tony Hawk's Pro Skater was released by Tony Hawk in 1999, and it's basically the first in a long series of games. And the goal of the game is to successfully perform and combine aerials, flips, grinds, and all that to add to your player score. The point value of the trick is based on a maintained degree rotated number of tricks performed in a sequence and the amount of times the tricks have been used. The more often the trick is used, the less it's worth. So successful tricks also add to the player special meter, which once full allows for the execution of what they call signature moves, which are worth a greater deal more than normal tricks. Bails, or falling off the skateboard due to poor landing, causes no points, and it resets your bar to empty. So, you know, basically there was a lot of different games that came out, and I'm going to show you, I'm going to play this. And so you have to pick the park and so they came out with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 99, Pro Skater 2 in 2000, 2001 3, Pro Skater 4 in 2002, Tony Hawk's Underground 2003, Underground 2 in 2004, America's Wasteland 2005, American Skateland 2005, Project 8 in 2006, Downhill Jam, Proving Ground in 2007, Tony Hawk's Motion in 2008, Tony Hawk's Ride in 2009, and Shred in 2010. Okay, so on our study guide, ID's 1996 Quake brought about many new first-person shooter movements like bunny hopping and strafe jumping and rocket jumping. Capcom's Resident Evil is one of the first games to be dubbed a survival horror. And Activision's 99 Tony Hawk's Pro Skater pushed the sports genre with innovative gameplay, level designs, and a control scheme. I wanted to show you Shred, and Shred is kind of cool because it has a little game control, and you would play it with the Wii, and so a little bit different than your normal playing with a controller. It also gave you avatars and all that kind of stuff, and you could also do surfing as well. So basically the price of it was about $120 for the bundle, including the skateboard controller. Unfortunately, it didn't do very well, and the game later you could get it for around 20 bucks. And then they put all the Tony Hawk franchises on hold. So the Sega Saturn is a 32-bit 5th generation video game console that was first released by Sega in 1994. While it was very popular in Japan, the Saturn failed to gain similar market share in North America and Europe against like the PlayStation and Nintendo 64. Metal Gear is an overhead military action adventure game originally released in 1987 by Konami, and considered to be the progenitor of the stealth game genre. It was also the first video game designed by Hideo Kojima, who also directed many of the later Metal Gear sequels. A heavily altered port was produced for the NES, along with a remade version based on the original game for the PlayStation 2. The game revolves around the Special Forces operative codenamed Solid Snake, who goes into a solo infiltration mission into a fortified state of outer heaven to destroy this thing called Metal Gear, a bipedal walking tank that was capable of launching nuclear missiles anywhere in the world. And this is sort of what the gameplay would look like. I don't have actually play, but you would kind of sneak around and sort of a top-down look. Later, in 1988, they made Metal Gear Solid, commonly abbreviated as MGS, and it's basically the same person designed it, Hideo Kojima, and it was developed it once again from Konami, but this time it was completely all 3D, and it still, kind of felt really similar to the 2D version, and you must kind of walk around and sneak around game areas without being detected, and basically you could get detected by, getting into the enemy's field of vision or setting an alarm off, basically with noises. There's a couple of things like alert mode, and you kind of would have to stay hidden until that went off and it went back into evasion mode. And then also infiltration mode, where the enemies are not suspicious of Snake's presence. Basically to stay undetected, the player could perform a lot of techniques such as crawling under objects, using boxes as cover, ducking and hiding around walls, and making other noise to distract enemies. The good thing about this is the game featured some cinematic cutscenes rendered in high resolution graphics, which was kind of cool. The game Metal Gear Rising came out in 2013, and basically the game focuses on fighting enemies such as using a sword and multiple sub-weapons to perform combos and counterattacks. Through the use of blade mode, this character Raiden can dismember cyborgs in slow motion and steal parts stored in their bodies. A series of stealth elements are also optional to reduce the combat. Players assume this role of this character Raiden, and he kind of wields around a katana, and he is initially playable in the white form, which is based on his appearance in the game Patriots. Then, whereas he's depicted wearing white armor. In the second chapter, the game switches to a more powerful black cyborg armor variant. Nevertheless, the player can alter Raiden's appearance through alternative skins. Unlike previous titles in Metal Gear series, where players try not to be noticed, they're stealthy and try to stay away. This game is basically action-oriented, focused on sword fighting and sophisticated cutting systems to fight and defeat enemies. Although his main weapon is a blade, he can also wield weapons such as a dagger or a rocket launcher, and there's some other sub-weapons can be obtained by defeating bosses. Here's some gameplay. He sliced their car. Okay, the latest one at this time when I was recording the video is Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain. And here's a little bit of gameplay for that. So it's a base building feature that allows players to develop weapons from items from their home base. And basically you can even get to your home base by a smartphone, which is kind of cool. And a new game design direction will allow the player to choose in what order the story takes place, selecting missions in the order they like, and basically still understanding the whole concept. And there's the producers. And I'm going to fast forward it a little bit. Okay, Warcraft. Warcraft Orcs and Humans was a real-time strategy game in 1994, developed by Blizzard and published by Blizzard and Interplay. Um, and basically, there was an MS-DOS, a Mac version, and several others. Um, Basically, then there was a sequel, Warcraft 2: Tides of Darkness, and and what it was trying to be is become the rival to Westwood Studios' Command and Conquer series. Warcraft Orcs and Humans, uh, the contenders play at the same time and continuously, so players have to move quickly. One player represents the human inhabitants of Azeroth, and the other controls invading orcs. Each side tries to destroy the other by collecting resources and creating an army. In addition, both sides have to ward off dangers from wild monsters, but sometimes can use the monsters as troops. The gameplay is a medieval setting with fantasy elements. Both sides have melee units and ranging units, and also spellcasters. Although Warcraft Orcs and Humans was not the first RTS title to offer multiplayer games, Blizzard's game persuaded a wider audience that multiplayer facilities were essential for future titles. The game introduced innovations in mission design and gameplay elements, which were adopted by other developers. Blizzard's main emphasis in this games were on skillful management of relatively small forces and on development of characterization and storyline within the games being played in the same universe. And this is a screen of orcs versus humans. Later we're going to see Tides of Darkness, Warcraft 2, Beyond the Dark Portal 96, 1999 BattleNet, Warcraft 2, Warcraft 3 in 2002, 2001, The Reign of Chaos, Warcraft 3, The Frozen Throne, 2004 World of Warcraft, 2005 The Burning Crusade, 2008 World of Warcraft Wrath of the Lich King, 2009 Cataclysm, World of Warcraft Cataclysm, and then the latest one is Mists of Pandaria, 2011, 2012. So, the World of Warcraft in 2010 is a massively multiplayer online role-playing game, or MMORPG, and it's by Blizzard, and it was the fourth release game in the Fantasy That Warcraft series. Which was the first one was Warcraft Orcs and Humans in 1994. So, this one takes place in the same world approximately 4 years after the events of the conclusion of the previous one, Warcraft 3, The Frozen Throne, and it was released on 2004, that other one. The first expansion set of the game, The Burning Crusade, was released on 2007, and I kind of went through all those, so I won't go through them again. With about 10.3 million subscribers as of 2011, I'm sure that's much more now. It was one of the most subscribed MMORPGs, and it holds the Guinness Book of World Records for being the most popular. And here's a couple of playing titles from it.
The changes to Azeroth in World of Warcraft Cataclysm are drastic, but is the game better for it? Well, that's what we're in the process of figuring out. But while we're not quite ready to give Blizzard's expansion a score yet, here are our impressions so far. When Deathwing broke out of the ground a few weeks ago, he tore Azeroth a new whirlpool. Huge swaths of both Kalimdor and the Eastern Kingdoms were reforged. The main cities of Orgrimmar and Stormwind have been rebuilt, the world looks wildly different, and the way you progress from low to high level has been largely changed. And in our experience so far, the changes have been great. Right from the start, questing has been streamlined. No longer do you have to cross continents to complete a sequence or a flat. The goblins have always been very tongue-in-cheek, and Blizzard has gone all out with their opening quests. On the other end of the spectrum is the level 80 and upwards content. We spent most of our time in the Underwaters and you go about exploring, in which you live out tried and true kill and collect quests, albeit much more streamlined than in previous expansions.
So that's Cataclysm. Here is Mists of Pandaria.
Best content yet in Blizzard's World of Warcraft. Across the new continent of Pandaria, you'll level from 85 to 90, and despite WoW's nearly 8 years of operation, still find experiences that feel new. Blizzard's emphasis on focused story delivery and clever quest design means WoW, at least while leveling in the new content, feels less like a grind than it ever has before. Pandaria is a very pretty place. Between Jade Forest's ancient ruins, the rolling farmlands of Valley of the Four Winds, and the golden fields of the Vale of Eternal Blossoms, the excellent zone design and attention to detail adds to the excitement of exploration. Simultaneously, this dungeon has boss attack patterns that require you to move around and stay alert instead of standing still and waiting for the boss to inevitably fall over. Few encounters feel the same, and none feel unfairly frustrating. In case dungeons are too intimidating, Blizzard offers scenarios, which are instanced more forgiving challenges for 3 players.
Okay. Half-Life is a science fiction first-person shooter game developed by Valve in 1998, and the company's debut product. And it was first released by Sierra Studios. That was also released, Sierra did all the Haunted Mansion and those earlier games that were text-based. So basically, Valve was set up by these former Microsoft employees, and they had a difficult time finding a publisher for the game, believing that this game Half-Life was too ambitious of a project. But Sierra eventually signed on the game and made it into what it is today with Valve, and became an 3D action game using the Quake engine that we talked about earlier. Quake, developed by id. In Half-Life, the player assumes the role of Dr. Gordon Freeman, a theoretical physicist who must fight his way out of a secret underground research facility, whose research and experiments into teleportation technology have gone disastrously wrong. Half-Life is a first-person shooter that requires the player to perform combat tasks and puzzle solving to advance through the game. Unlike the other games at the time, Half-Life uses these sort of scripted sequences, such as a bull script ramming down a door to advance the major plot points. While most contemporary first-person shooters relied on cutscene intermissions to detail their plot lines, Half-Life's story is told entirely by means of scripted sequences, keeping the player in control of his or own first-person viewpoint the entire time. In line with this, the game has no cutscenes, and the player rarely loses the ability to control Gordon, who never speaks and never is actually seen in the game. And it won a lot of awards when it first came out, and here's an example of what the gameplay looks like. And here's a funny little cartoon that I found that I thought was kind of funny. And we're about to study Half-Life 2. So here is Half-Life 2, and it came out in 2004. So 98 was Half-Life, 99 was Half-Life Opposing Forces, 2001 was Blue Shift, 2001 was Decay, 2004 is Half-Life 2, which is what we're seeing here. They later came out with a deathmatch version. 2005 was a Lost Coast. 2006, Episode 1, Half-Life 2, 2006 Survivor. And then later we're going to see Episode 2, and then 2007 Portal and Portal 2, which is in 2011. I'll show you that. So obviously the graphics have gotten a lot better in 2004. So the Orange Box is a video game compilation for Windows, Xbox 360, Mac, and PlayStation 3. And basically it was you would get Half-Life 2 and Episode 1, and then you could also get Half-Life, this sort of Team Fortress, and some of these other games. And basically it was a compilation of 5 games, all powered by the Valve Source engine. The Half-Life 2 and its Episode 1 was there. 3 other games, Half-Life Episode 2, the puzzle game Portal, and Team Fortress 2, which became a huge hit. And they were all, once again, based on the Quake engine. And a separate product entitled The Black Box was planned, which would only include the new games, but it was canceled. And this received a lot of positive feedback and a lot of acclaim. So here's Half-Life 2 Episode 2. This is Team Fortress, and all the characters are sort of in any kind of, you know, shooter like snipers and assault, and they're sort of extreme weaponry, turrets and stuff like that, a minigun. And here's Portal, and this is a game we're going to talk about here in a second. And basically you use this gun and create portals to solve some different puzzles. So Portal was a game, and basically this little diagram kind of shows you, you would shoot the gun and make a portal, and then it would kick you out somewhere else, and your goal was, you know, to get across this chasm. And basically this is how you would do it. And it was developed by Valve, and once again released in that orange box in 2007. The game primarily comprises of a series of puzzles that must be solved by teleporting the player's character and simple objects using the Aperture Science handheld portal device, a device that can create interspatial portals between 2 flat planes. The player's character shell is challenged by an artificial intelligence named GLaDOS, genetic life form and disk operating system, to complete each puzzle in the Aperture Science Enrichment Center using a portal gun with the promise of receiving cake when all the puzzles are completed. The game's unique physics allow momentum to be retained through portals, requiring creative use of portals to maneuver through the test chambers. And the gameplay is based on a similar concept from the game Narbicular Drop. Many of the team members from the DigiPen Institute of Technology who worked on that particular game, Narbicular Drop, were hired by Valve to create Portal.
Welcome to the Aperture Science Enrichment Center. Let's look at some of the challenge form simple tasks, such as locating an exit. These simple tasks may be supplemented with insurmountable obstacles. Thanks to the Aperture Science handheld portal device, the impossible is easy. Let's look at a real-world example. Certain objects may be vital to your success. If at first you don't succeed, you fail, and the test will be terminated. When stuck, remember our motto: there's a hole in the sky through which things can fly.
So you kind of get the idea.
At the enrichment.
So you can pick objects up, you can throw them through the portal, you can run through the portal. Then they came out with Portal 2. And it's a sequel to the other game. This came out in 2011. So in this one there was new devices such as tractor beams, laser redirection, and paint light gels that impart special properties to objects that they cover. So a lot of more gameplay elements, and still a lot of what very similar to the first Portal. Gran Turismo is a 1997 Sony game, and abbreviated as GT1, and it was developed by Polyphony Digital, and first created, like I said, 1997 for the PlayStation, and it's spawned over 10 or 11 spin-offs and sequels. And it's basically fundamentally a racing genre game. The player must maneuver an automobile through and compete against artificially intelligent drivers on various racetracks. There was 2 different modes, arcade and simulation. And basically, in arcade mode, the player could freely choose in courses and vehicles, and winning races unlocked additional cars and things like that. So you weren't really playing against people, you were playing against a computer. Later, we're going to see that open up and be multiplayer over the web and in the cloud. So here is the newest release, Gran Turismo 6, and basically it's the 12th game in that series of racing, and you'll just see the differences in terms of quality. So you can see just in terms of the difference in terms of image quality and rendering, and I mean just completely different, completely beautiful, and reflections of camera. The Nintendo 64, often referred to as N64, is Nintendo's third home video console, and it had a 64-bit CPU. It was the last home console to use ROM cartridges to store games. They later switched to mini DVD-based format, like for the GameCube and such like that, and the Game Boy line. Used the game packs. It was released with two launch games, Super Mario 64 and Pilot Wing 64. It was later marketed under the slogan "Get in or get out," and there was a lot of different controllers that you could use, and it sold about 32 million units worldwide by 2009. It was of the consoles in the fifth generation, the Nintendo 64 was the last contender and the most technologically advanced. However, the console's storage medium had limitations that harmed the market competitiveness. Also was a significant limitation was the small capacity and high production expense of cartridge-based media instead of the compact disc format used by other competitors. So there was a lot of issues in terms of the media that you would play with the Nintendo 64. But it does become, on our top 10 video game consoles, number 9. The Super Mario 64 is a platform game published by Nintendo and developed at Nintendo, and it was released in 1996. As one of the first three-dimensional platform games, Super Mario 64 featured free-roaming analog degrees of freedom, large open-end areas, and true 3D polygons as opposed to two-dimensional sprites. It established a whole new archetype for the genre and held really revolutionary for its lasting impression in 3D game design, particularly notable for its use of dynamic camera system and the implementation of its analog control. In going from 2 to 3 dimensions, Super Mario 64 placed an emphasis on exploration within vast worlds and required the player to complete multiple diverse missions, replacing the linear obstacle course of traditional platform games. While doing so, it managed to preserve many gameplay elements and characters of earlier Mario games. A lot of people will say that that this particular game, Mario 64, became their the best game of all time. So under top 10 video games, number 5, Super Mario for the N64. GoldenEye was a first-person shooter developed by Rare for the Nintendo 64. It was published by Nintendo and sold in 1997. The game features a single-player campaign in which players assume the role of British Secret Intelligence Officer James Bond as he fights to prevent criminal syndicate from the use of a satellite weapon to cause a global financial meltdown. There's also a split multiplayer mode with up to 4 players that could play on the Nintendo 64. It was developed over about 2.5 years by an inexperienced development team, and it was originally intended to be an on-rail shooter inspired by Sega's Virtua Cop before being redesigned as a free-roaming shooter. As one of the first console first-person shooters, it established a lot of, once again, the elements that people would see in that genre, including a zoomable sniper rifle, stealth elements, and a multiplayer deathmatch mode on a console. Once again, there had been multiplayer games before, but they were mostly on the computer. It was a very big success, and it gained a lot of reviews. And here's a little bit of the play on it. And it's really based on a movie. There's a movie called GoldenEye, and so a lot of the scenes and environments are based on that movie. You can kind of see some of the movie clips. StarCraft is a military science fiction real-time strategy video game developed by Blizzard. The first game of the StarCraft series, and it was released in 1998. It's set in the 26th century. The game revolves around the three species fighting for dominance in a distant part of the Milky Way galaxy. And there's the Terrans, humans exiled from Earth, and the Zerg, a race of insectoid aliens in pursuit of a genetic perfection, obsessed with assimilating with other races, and the Protoss, a humanoid species with advanced technology and a lot of other abilities. And they attempt to preserve the civilization and strict philosophical way of living from the Zerg. The game has been praised for pioneering the use of unique factions in real-time strategy gameplay and for compelling story. And let's see, I don't know if this is, yeah, I actually have some gameplay down here. So here is a little bit of the game, the look that would be. Here is 2012's Heart of the Swarm. You can kind of see how this has grown. So StarCraft is the last one on our top 10 video game list. Okay, that concludes part 1, part A, and then we'll have 2 more part B and part C that we'll look at.